This happened several years ago. I was home alone one evening when I heard a knock at the back door. This confused me, as no one ever used that door. My husband and I lived in a fourplex at the time, and all of the units had a back door at the top of a narrow staircase. These doors were a little inconvenient to access, as you have to go around the building and up the narrow stairs, as opposed to the wider main entrance at the front. It didn't make sense to use the back entrance, and I couldn't think of anyone who would go to that door to visit. As I approached the back door, I saw two tall men in the window, standing at the door. A chill went down my spine. I did not feel safe opening the door, so I called out, "Hello?" One of the men tapped on the window.
"Yes, hello. May we come in? We are with Bresnan."
At the time, my husband and I had Bresnan for cable, but did not have any issues with it. I replied, "We're not having any issues with Bresnan. Is there a problem?"
"Ma'am,"
the man said.
"can we come in? We're servicing the area, and it's important we look at your cable."
I shook my head. "We're not having any issues," I repeated, "so there's no need to stop by."
"Ma'am, we are visiting every resident. Let us in so we can do our job."
I noticed the man grab the doorknob and try to open the locked door. I slowly grabbed a knife from our knife's block and held it at my chest. "We're not having any issues," I repeated, trying not to convey shakiness of my voice. "So you don't need to be here." The two figures appeared to shuffle and then straighten.
"Let us in. We're on a deadline and need to do our job."
I glanced at the clock, gauging when my husband would arrive home from work. I gripped the knife tighter.
Ma'am.
I saw him try the doorknob again. I closed my eyes and felt overwhelming gratitude of always locking my doors. Just then, a thought came to the forefront of my mind. "I'm sorry, I can't help you. Could I please get your names and badge numbers? I can give your supervisor a call to let them know that our cable is fine." I heard another shuffle, and one of the men replied,
"No need to, ma'am. We're sorry we wasted your time."
With that, both of the men exited the staircase and disappeared into the night. Shaken up, I held the knife tight and tried to get my bearings. I remember making a mental note to call the cable company or the police, but my hands were shaking so badly I couldn't hold my phone. With the knife still grasped to my chest and the phone falling out of my other hand, I sank to the floor and cried. When my husband returned home, I told him what had happened. I was still very shaken up and had started crying again after he came home. He immediately called the Bresnan Cable Company and spoke to a representative who informed us that no one from their company was out on assignment in our area. The next day, we asked our neighbors if they had had a visit from the company. No one had. So, to the creepy men who tried to break into my home under the disguise of cable repair, let's not meet. This happened to me around Christmas of 2015. I detailed what happened on my private social media accounts, and several women have messaged me and told me that they went through nearly identical situations at the same bookstore. I was pursuing a bookstore in my city around Christmas time. I was alert and often looking out for men following me. But this particular time, I was curious to see that just around every corner, whether I was browsing in nonfiction or fiction, a pair of older women were behind me or brushing by me to get to a shelf that I had just been looking at. The first woman was probably in her 70s, with a very exaggerated limp and making grunting noises with every movement. The second woman was possibly in her 60s and talking extremely loud to her partner about, "Ooh, check out this book," Look at the cover. It's so beautiful, interesting, weird. It became clear to me right away that they were turning up in every aisle I was in, not even seconds after I'd pick up a book. What ended up giving me the creeps was that I made it to the last aisle of comics. I had no interest or intent to look, but I was testing to see if I was followed. Sure fucking enough, these women trailed behind me and started grabbing books. Oh wow, look at how cool these little books are. I made eye contact with one of them and decided to bolt. One of the women, the younger of the two, was smiling widely at me, almost as if she recognized me. I leave the bookstore and paused at the front in order to let a car pass by, and then I hear an, "Excuse me, ma'am." I turn to see the woman walking up to me. One is still limping and now holding her shoulder as if she's in some kind of pain. The younger woman immediately begins saying in a very rushed, impatient voice, "Can you please help us? We have forgotten where we parked. I think it was somewhere towards the back. Can you please give us a ride around here until we see the car? Please, we're just a couple of old, fat ladies. We can't walk like we used to be able to." The last part threw me off. Who even says something like that unless it's some kind of weird guilt trip? Every alarm bell was going off in my head, and I just knew the limp was fake and their whole energy was shady. I was panicking, and I felt primal even. For the first time in my life, I yelled, "Fuck you," to a complete stranger. I ran back into the store, told a cashier who was a bigger, muscular guy who went out to check the situation, possibly to see if the woman did really need help. Saw them wave down a car driven by a younger-looking guy, as if they were waiting on him the whole time. They got in the car and left. Like I said earlier, there have been several more reports over the years of these women doing this at the same store. Always a pair of weird older women claiming that they need help to get to their car. Once they're refused or ignored, they get picked up anyway, I've heard. Now the bookstore has heightened security, but it gives me the creeps even to this day. I haven't heard anything about them in a while. I wonder what's happened, or if they've moved to a different spot. So, just as some background, I am a male and currently 25 and still living within 15 miles of my old house. This happened when I was around 8 or 9, making my sister at the time 5 or 6. We lived in a quiet neighborhood that, once I grew up, I found was actually a lower income part of town. However, we had some wonderful neighbors, and it was thanks to these neighbors that a lot of potentially negative situations were avoided. At the time, my dad was working an 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. job, and my mother was a secretary at a hospital, which meant that during the day, she was often at work. Usually my sister and I had a babysitter, but once I reached about 8 or 9, I began to be old enough to look out for us without a babysitter. Now, mind you, this was the 90s, which certainly were not safe, but were much safer than they are now. Also, we had the previously mentioned neighbors who generally did a good job of keeping an eye on us and our house. This particular incident was one of the first times I was charged to babysit my sister. She was in her high chair eating whatever my mom had left for us when I got a knock on our front door. Now, this was strange since we never got visitors on a regular basis, other than the boy across the street who would want us to come out and play, but he usually just yelled my name while knocking. I was young and naive and decided to open the door. There was a locked screen door beyond that. I left that closed and locked. Outside was a middle-aged man. I hardly remember his facial features or even body type. I remember his yellow shirt and dirty jeans. "Can I help you?" I asked innocently. No alarm bells going off yet.
Hey there, are your parents home?
All right, first alarm bell. My parents teaching me not to trust strangers rushed through my head, but I still didn't quite fully grasp the potential danger here. My mom went to the store. She'll be back any minute. Weird half-lie. I could have said that she was here, but in the shower, or that she was lying down upstairs. I'm glad that I didn't tell him that she wouldn't be back for quite a few hours, but looking back, it's scary how naive I was.
Well, that's no problem. Hey, so look, my dog went missing, and I think it went into your backyard. Do you mind if I come in and we can go check it out?
Okay, so I may have been dumb, but I wasn't that dumb. There was no way in hell I was letting this stranger into my house, especially with my sister there. She was my first thought. Sure, I didn't want to have any harm fall on me, but she was my sister, and it was my job to keep her safe. I should have closed the door right then and there, but once again, I went with a less safe, but still not totally stupid route. Well, the gate should be unlocked. If you want to go check in the backyard, you can, and promptly closed the door. Now, of course, I was very curious if there was a stray dog in my backyard. Dogs are great. Even with the weird guy being around, I was pretty interested to see how his search in the backyard went. So I decided to check the back window and see if there was actually a dog, and if so, if the man would catch it. Now, at this point, I'm sure that you figured out that there was no dog, and when I looked out the back window, I could see almost the entire yard, including the gate. The man wasn't there. This was mere seconds after I had closed the door on him. I waited for a few minutes, but he never showed up. After about 5 minutes, there was another knock on my door. This time I was much more wary, and I didn't like this guy showing up. I was pretty tired of the whole ordeal, but I still hadn't fully grasped the situation. I kept the chain lock on the door and cracked it open. "Did you find your dog?" Again, I can't remember his facial features, so I really cannot recall his expression, but I remember his tone was a bit desperate, as well as annoyed.
No, I looked all over the yard, and I couldn't find him. I have a picture in my car if you want to take it, just in case you see him.
Nope, no more. I still didn't understand abduction, but I certainly wasn't going to go anywhere outside of the house with this stranger. I told him that he can leave a picture in the mailbox and we will keep an eye out, once again promptly closing the door. What followed is really what creeps me out to this day. Looking back, I was freaked out that I had come that close to exposing my sister and myself to danger, but this scared the shit out of me. Suddenly, there was more knocking on my door. Not the screen door separating the door itself. Like I mentioned previously, the screen door was locked, and unless that was open, it was impossible to knock on the door itself. It freaked me the fuck out, and I took my sister to my bedroom and crept back out to the kitchen, where I could see out into the front yard, and I saw the man quickly getting back into his car, while my saint of a next-door neighbor, Joan, stood on her front lawn, smoking and watching him intently. It took a long time for me to add it all up, and honestly, I had forgotten about it for a long time. When I finally remembered it all, I couldn't even believe my own memories. I'm still debating with myself to actually tell my parents now. I wouldn't want to unnecessarily upset them, but maybe it's an important story to tell my 2 younger sisters, one of whom is getting married soon, just as a life lesson. Mr. Yellow Shirt Man? Yeah, let's not meet ever again.
I worked at a small local diner for a year back in 2019. It was just a regular ordinary restaurant, and I was a server there. The place closed at 10 every night, but my shift actually ended at 11 because I had to clean all the tables in the back room before heading home. It was a normal night of closing alone, and I just locked the doors at 10 p.m. I began wiping down the tables, but after just a couple seconds, several loud knocks came from the front door. It made me jump, but I looked over and saw a man standing there, looking through the glass door. I spoke loudly, telling him the place was closed for the night. This has happened before, so it wasn't much of a big deal, but the guy stayed there for a little bit, as if he didn't understand what I said. I walked closer to the door. "Sorry, the store closed at 10. We aren't taking any more orders tonight." I spoke even louder this time, so I knew he heard me. The guy looked at me for a second with no reaction, before making a slight smile and turning around as he walked away. I thought he might have been drunk or something, but I forgot about it after a couple minutes and continued with my work. I finished cleaning all the tables and started wiping down the front counter when I saw out of the corner of my eye a figure moving towards the front door, followed by knocking again. It was the same guy from 15 minutes ago, standing right outside, looking through the door at me. I'd never had someone do this before, so I was more annoyed this time. I raised both of my arms up as in a "what are you doing" kind of gesture. The man, still staring at me, knocked again. I told him with a very loud and strict voice that we were closed and he needed to leave. This time, though, he looked very bothered by what I had said. He tensed up, then gave the door a small push as if to test if it was locked or not, before walking away. "What the hell is wrong with that guy?" I said out loud to myself as I walked towards the front windows to make sure that he was leaving the area. I didn't see him anywhere in the parking lot, so I figured he was gone for good. I checked the time and was slightly annoyed as it was later than I was hoping, but just as I began walking over to the counter, a sudden loud bang came from the restaurant's back door. I froze in fear as I wasn't confident whether or not the back door was locked. But a couple seconds later, they began hitting the door over and over. Knowing now that the door was locked, I knew I needed to leave while I still had the chance. I sprinted out the front door and got my car, calling the police as fast as I could. After a minute or two, I could see through the restaurant window as the man appeared and began looking through the whole building. Then he tried to open the cash register, but I think he gave up after a few tries, and then he disappeared to the back of the store. Once the police arrived, they made sure the man was gone and then got the whole story from me. The back door had huge dents in it, and the door handle was almost completely gone, clearly having been beaten by a hammer or something. But other than that, there wasn't much damage, or even anything stolen aside from the tip jar that we kept at the front counter. I just find it crazy that some people are willing to do these sort of things just for a couple extra bucks. Who knows what he would have done if I had stood in his way.
Our official merch store is finally here. If you want to support more of our channel, check out our merch shop. The link is in the description down below. See you on the next video.